Necromunda. Not a very nice place. Innumerable gun factories to feed the Imperium of man. An endless sea of humanity, gang warfare, violence and dogs. But the dogs are okay. This is you, a bounty hunter. It's tough work, but it pays well and business is endless in a place like this. Seriously, endless. You kill for a living, yeah, which is fun on its own. But there's also people to find, information to hunt down, your cybermastiff to feed, loot to, loot. Doing that job takes you all over the underhive. Humongous trains pulling tons of cargo through gang war zones. Mile-high stacks of ancient technology feeding mega furnaces to pump out arcane weapons. Jury-rigged fortresses, chem labs, fighting pits, abandoned wrecks of spacecraft leaking throne knows what. It's gonna be an adventure, all right. It's busy work, and lots of people are hell-bent on making it harder. Martyr's End. An oasis of mild peace inside the whirlwind that is the underhive, and filled with just the most wonderful people. Rogue doctors, dome runners, gangers, murderers, gun dealers. Even a barmaid has more information than you'd expect, for the price of a couple of drinks. That might seem like a lot of people to worry about, alongside the endless guilds, the gene stealer and corpse cults. Even the enforcers and machinations of the Inquisition have an influence. But they, and the various houses and gangs, all want one thing: their targets eliminated, their information found. Get to work.
Yeah, I mean, the prefab trailers for Necromunda Hired Gun are looking pretty solid, but what about the actual gameplay? Well, we've had a chance to see 5 or 6 new weapon spotlights over the last week or so, and rather than assuage my fears and get me even more hyped for release, as I'm sure was the intent of these trailers, it's kind of accomplished the exact opposite. It's still way too early to tell, don't misunderstand. I'm not consigning a Hired Gun to the graveyard before I've even had a chance to play it, but from what I've seen so far, it looks like we might be headed down the same path forged by Space Hulk Deathwing back in 2016. Gorgeous environments, oozing atmosphere and ambiance everywhere, a faithful adaptation of this little slice of the 40k universe, but uneven sound design, clunky animations, unsatisfying melee combat, and a development cycle that just can't quite seem to pull it all together and form a cohesive, entertaining game with a lot of replayability. Those were the elements that characterized Deathwing to me, and I'm already kind of getting some of those same vibes here. So, what do I not like about what's been shown thus far, and how do I think it can be improved? Well, let me just say right off the bat, it's 2021. If you're a game developer and you're trying to show off your game, you should probably be uploading in 1440p. 1080p has been drawn, cornered, and dragged through the mud by YouTube. It is ugly, the compression is awful now, and it makes your game look fuzzy and bad. Which is dumb, because 1080p should be more than enough for most of us, but I guess in an effort to save on storage space, YouTube's just kinda given it a spanking over the last year or two, and it's gotten worse over that time span. So, if you want a higher bitrate and you want people to actually see what's going on in your game, I recommend uploading your trailers at 1440p. It will double or triple your bitrate. It will make it look way crisper and way better. That aside, I'm really not a fan of this kind of approach to trailers. I get what the devs are going for here in uploading a bunch of really short, quick-cut gameplay segments to keep it high action, high octane, show some stuff off without giving too much away. But I just don't think it does you any favors when you're trying to attract a crowd, because it makes it look like you're trying to hide something. Like the cuts need to be there to disguise some of the jank and the performance issues and the stiffness that are kind of present throughout. I'm not saying that's why they've taken this approach here, I just know it's a common editing trick used in those kind of situations, and if you're trying to get people excited, just show short, uncut gameplay that showcases what Hired Gun has to offer and let the gameplay speak for itself. People are rightfully going to be a little apprehensive about this game based on their experience with Space Hulk Deathwing because it's the same devs. I think 30 seconds of uncut gameplay clearing out a room with a particular weapon would do a better job to assuage those fears than just wild hammer cuts 15 times in 30 seconds where it's kind of hard to see or understand what's going on. Because we don't get to see the impact very well, we don't get to see how enemies react to gunfire or explosions very well, and when we're a month out from release, I think we're kind of getting to the point where that's important. But the elements of these gameplay trailers that I want to focus on today are the animations, the visual clutter, and the melee combat. And we'll start with the visual clutter because it's a massive pet peeve of mine and should hopefully be a relatively easy fix, or at the very least an option that we can turn on and off. Not everyone's going to share this opinion, obviously, but I cannot stand when games have damage numbers and critical hit and all kinds of text floating off enemies when I shoot them or smack them with a hammer. There's a time and a place for that kind of thing in RPGs and MMOs, but I do not see why that kind of stuff is needed in a game like Hired Gun, in an FPS. When Assassin's Creed started doing it in Origins, I hated it then, I hate it now in FPS games. An important principle of both the video game and movie medium is show, don't tell. Critical hit and weird RPG text being splattered all over your screen when you shoot things is not necessary. I don't need to be told that I just critted a guy when I shoot him in the head. Show me by making his model receive the requisite damage and playing a satisfying sound effect that matches the weapon I'm using. So, if I shoot someone in the head with 50 BMG, I want to hear a splatter and a crunch, and I want to see the head explode. Give me audio and visual cues that make it clear I am smashing them. Doesn't need to say critical hit in big blocky lettering, because that's immersion breaking. It doesn't help the game, it hurts it. It adds a bunch of stuff on screen that you don't need. Show, don't tell. And the same thing goes for these gigantic ammo boxes that enemies are pooping out when you kill them. Why? Why are those a thing? Those could be like a quarter of the size they are currently, and they'd still probably be too big. Massive, shiny ammo drops the size of a 1980s boombox falling out of some Escher girl's butthole when I shoot her twice just isn't necessary. It adds a lot of visual noise that is not a requirement for Hired Gun. Get rid of it. I'm seeing some pretty massive FPS drops and performance issues in these gameplay trailers as well, which is never a great sign in a trailer, because if they can't make it run smooth on their own systems, that's typically not a great sign for the plebs at home. But again, it's kind of hard to judge because the gameplay is so spliced up, so cut into little itty-bitty pieces that there's really not much to say on that front. I'm hoping it won't be a problem, but Space Hulk Deathwing had some serious performance issues when it first came out, and had those problems until Enhanced Edition came out like a year later. So we'll see how that goes. I have no idea. Let's move on. But there is a lot to talk about when it comes to animations and the way enemies are moving and reacting to the player's shots. And this is an element I'm pretty worried about because there isn't a whole lot of time to tweak and fix stuff like this when it's releasing on June 1st. I mean, we're pretty much a month away at this point, and the animations are looking exceptionally clunky and stiff, which was one of my biggest issues with Space Hulk Deathwing. Plenty of examples to show off on that front. This particular animation is played in multiple trailers. Point blank pistol shot, dude falls over and dies. Okay, it's hard for me to describe exactly what's wrong with it. I just know AAA animation when I see it, and that ain't it. It just doesn't look good. Just kinda lacks impact and fluidity, I guess is the best way I could put it. Just kinda looks stiff. But take a look at this Ogren, for example. Everything about this is abysmal. Like, comically bad. I'd find something like this acceptable maybe in 2008, not in 2018, and we're 3 years past that. I guess it is kind of hilarious. It just doesn't remotely evoke the same sense of weight and power we saw from the Ogren in the announcement trailer, and not only that, he just visually kind of looks bad. Like, I can't fully put it into words, but anyone who stumbled upon this trailer and saw that segment has got to be cringing a little bit. It's not a good look. But okay, let's take a look at the melee combat. We've seen some examples of sync kills and takedown animations in this game, which is clearly a step in the right direction from Deathwing, where you would wave at the air and nearby enemies caught in the AoE would just kind of happen to explode. But the core melee combat system doesn't look very different to me. It looks very similar to Deathwing. Just a handful of generic slicing animations with little in the way of dynamism or range of motion. No fluidity, again, very stiff. Now what I'm hoping is that the grappling hook and the focus on vertical movement and wall running will add some extra flair to both the gunplay and the melee combat. Because if they nail that portion of the gameplay, making it easy to learn and hard to master while allowing the movement to blend seamlessly with the combat, then even if some of the animations might be clunky and stiff and unsatisfying, you've still got something to fall back on. I'm not impressed by the way enemy characters react to you running at them, how you attack, or what happens when they die. I think it kind of looks a little bit generic right now, but if the movement is good and has a skill curve to it, that could go a long way in improving other parts that perhaps feel a little bit lackluster. So we'll see. I think movement will be a huge core component of this game, and if they're able to nail that element, I'll be excited to see what Hired Gun has to offer, but we haven't seen too much on how that all works yet, so I'll reserve judgment on that front. What I won't reserve judgment on is the bolt gun, which I fear once again will not be done justice. Right now, it does not look or sound scary at all. And while I understand this is a smaller, less powerful version than the one our Space Marine friends would wield in battle, it's still an intimidating weapon firing 75 caliber rocket-propelled explosive shells. Why does it sound like it's being fired underwater? Why does it just lack all punch and impact when this has been a core criticism of like 15 different Warhammer games from Dawn of War to Space Hulk? Why is Space Marine the only 40k game to actually get every element of the bolt gun correct? Make it sound big, scary, and intimidating, like when Terry Crews grabs the AA-12 in Expendables and mows down a horde of bad guys. When it hits people, they should explode. When someone pulls out a bolt gun and starts shooting, everyone who hears that shot should freeze, look at each other, and collectively poop their pants. You can balance it by giving it less ammo or any number of other ways, but bolt guns are beastly. They deserve to be recognized as such in gameplay. And whatever this is, looks more like an auto gun to me than a real bolt gun. It should not sound like it's being fired 5 houses down in somebody's basement. I'm not sure why this is so hard to do. Big punch, big bassy sound, big impact when bad guys get shot, we're gonna be happy. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you're missing the core elements of what makes a bolt gun, then obviously people are not gonna be happy with it. With all that said, it's definitely not all bad here, but the character and weapon customization options look nice. Lots of different skins, lots of different attachments, visual flair, and skills you can hook up with your character, and I'm a big fan of that. I like customization in my games, especially my FPS games, but we still don't know too much about how all of that will actually work. The environments are gorgeous and well designed and seem to encourage that mobile style of Titanfall movement and gameplay. It seems to be at the core of Hired Gun. And when it comes to the underhive, it feels like the devs have done a great job bringing the seedy underbelly of this wasteland to life. So all of that is great. I don't have too many complaints on that front at all. But I cannot truthfully say that I was more excited for Necromunda Hired Gun after watching all these weapon spotlights. I feel like it's lacking quite a bit right now, and I'm hoping that more gameplay will be able to assuage some of my fears, but I have more questions than answers at the moment, and that worries me when we're only 1 month from launch. It's looking pretty rough around the edges right now, and we're getting pretty close to drop day. So, I'll be curious to see what they have in store for us, but let's just say at the moment, I'm not exactly blown away, and I was certainly hoping to be.